So I was trying to figure, hello? I was trying to figure if there was a chairman or something, and I don't think this is the case. So we are going to start immediately. And it's this session is supposed to be a roundtable, but I'm going to present some slides to make the point about something a bit different from plant pathology proper. And so I have to probably give up some background, and you'll see that. So first, I want to thank you. I want to thank the organizers for organizing this, inviting me, but especially for organizing this session about research integrity, which I think is an important issue. My name is Olivier Le Gall. I'm a plant pathologist, actually, and I'm currently chairing the board of the French Office for Research Integrity, which is a new entity in France, and which has a counterpart in some countries, but not all. And I'm going to not speak about the office at all. It's not so interesting, but maybe some achievements. And especially I'm trying, in this talk, I'm going to try to make some points about research integrity, what it is about, why it is important, why it is slightly different from ethics, and how it might evolve in the coming time. And then I would like, if you want, that we have a discussion to get your feedback about all that, especially in the field of plant pathology. I've tried to choose some examples that were not all of them in the field of plant pathology. I don't think a lot of things are specific to plant pathology. Plant pathology is like a mixture of, let's say, ecology and or a mixture, some at the meeting point between ecology, biology, and stuff. You know that as well as I do. And I sometimes do this type of talk with chemists, astrophysicists, etc., philosophers, etc. So I'm a bit closer to my own field. Actually, I've been at some ICPP meetings before as a plant pathologist. Okay, we are going to start. You can get the slides at this short URL, and you can scan this QR code to it's equivalent to the URL. Technically, you can reuse the slides. They are under an attributive license, if you like to, and you can call me if you need anything. You can even sell the slides if you manage to sell them. It's not protected against commercial use. I never managed to sell them. Just if you manage to sell them, tell me how. Okay, we are living in a strange era where that was some years ago. An advisor of the then president of the United States was explaining a journalist who could not believe what he was hearing, that truth isn't truth, and that if the president says something and someone else says something else, truth isn't truth. And so this guy is actually a lawyer, and lawyers can. Sorry? Not anymore. But that's the training. He comes from law, and for lawyers, if I make this talk in front of lawyers, they say, yeah, for us, it's truth isn't truth. But the point is, when these persons were at high positions, they were using this difficulty of establishing the truth, even for issues as important as climate change, food security, etc. And when they were elected, there was if you remember, in 2017, there was a movement that we were marching for science I think that was on the 17th of April. We were marching for science, explaining everyone that science reveals reality, science improves decisions, science is not an opinion, etc. And I was there. You were there, maybe, probably. And then the conclusion of that is, if that's true, and I think that's true, we must prove it. It's not self-evident for everyone. And basically, if we expect to be respected, we have to be respectable first. I want to tell you about something that there is a duality between research and science. I must tell you that these images have been manipulated. This version of Einstein is actually looking to the link in the original. There is a difference between research and science, and when you ask these persons, us, what they do about what is their everyday life, they tell about surfing unknowledge, waves of unknowledge. You can discuss everything, you can challenge everything. And what the society wants, especially in times of crisis, is science. They want the scientists to be helping them contemplating oceans of knowledge. And they don't want waves of unknowledge. That's not what they want. But as scientists, just like me, you are convinced that it's actually the same thing. On the surface of the ocean of knowledge, there are waves of unknowledge. And it's extremely exciting to surf the waves of unknowledge. That's why we like this job. But it doesn't mean the ocean is going to empty sometimes. It doesn't mean that. And for the decision makers, they are not aware of that. And so we have to be clear about that, about the status of knowledge and how facts, published facts congregates together to end up in something that is actual knowledge, and that's the scientific method. And research integrity is about integrity of the scientific method, actually. And that's why it's important, especially in times of crisis. So, if you ask these people again, us, in the streets, we say, yeah, we are very serious because every single one of our papers is peer-reviewed by experts in the field. And you know, this is at the same time, it's true, and it's not completely sufficient sometimes. You know that in your flesh, because some of your papers, very good papers, sometimes get trouble getting published. Most of them are eventually published. It's actually a very strong quality check, but it's fallible, and you know it. There are some examples. I didn't show an example which I show sometimes, which is very illustrative of that. It's the Seralini 2012 paper. From the beginning to the end, it's full of. So there has never been an inquiry. So it's not sure if it's fraud or just sloppy science, but it's full of problems, and it's been retracted. And but I would very much have liked to have like an open window on the reviewing process. And the reason why peer review is not sufficient, it's very good, it's very useful, and you do that, I know that, is that the reviewer's task is usually not to redo the work. It may be the case in some disciplines. In math, they redo a lot of the work, but it's usually not their task to redo the work. They are not universal experts, even in their field, especially when they read a paper which is at the tip of the edge, because, I mean, no one is expert there. And they work under time pressure. There is one publisher booth there. And one of their argument is that they make a decision within 18 days. It cannot be serious. I mean, it takes more than that to read the paper, to exchange between the editor and the reviewers, and to have the feedback from the reviewers, exchange with the authors again, etc. I mean, just this, not even if the reviewer work at night, and they do, you do, we do. But even that, I mean, even if they do, it's 18 days is not serious, cannot be serious. The editor's job is often to find compromises. The reviewers and the authors usually do not agree. You know that from your papers. You know from your papers that when you don't agree, you try to convince the editor that you are right and not the reviewer, sometimes at least, maybe not for everything. Sometimes you discover, yeah, once in 10 times maybe the reviewer is right, but then there are some issues. And the editor, actually there is a compromise. The editor do not request all comments to be addressed, and their decisions are quite often opaque for the reader. So as a reader, you don't know what the reviewers have challenged, and you don't know, usually you don't know, and you don't know why, what the editors have accepted to, okay, let's put this apart. And in any case, peer review will not detect fabricated or falsified data or results or now text, will not detect plagiarism or other types of inappropriate credit, like if you put your dog as a co-author, the reviewer cannot tell that it's your dog. And there's actually been a paper with the dog, that's why. That was the dog of the president of the French Republic. But the reviewer could not tell, of course. We've got the self-healing of science. And I'm going to tell you a story. Maybe the older one of you, they know about that story. It's the story of the so-called Voynet scandal. I write so-called because I think it's very unfair to put the finger on one person like that. But this is that's how it was presented in many places. So I kept the name, but I think so-called is very important. That's the publication record of this researcher, very brilliant researcher. I was not the only one who thought that some of these papers there should have contributed to the Nobel Prize of Andy Fire and Craig Mello. Because that was on small RNA, it's very, very interesting and very innovative work. And suddenly, bam, at the end of 2014, it came out that some of the papers had to be retracted, others had to be corrected, others were flagged in a website called PubPeer, and not many were left from the publication record. And that was a terrible thing. The scientific field was damaged, plant science. There were 9 retractions of even including some very key papers, and I'm going to come back on that later. 18 were corrected, more were flagged. The PhD thesis of the main author was questioned because it relied on retracted papers, and it was finally the doctoral school said it was okay. They re-examined the PhD thesis, because it's important to say that in this case, usually it was not fraud in the sense of trying to deceive the reader. It was sloppy science, taking the wrong controls that were not made in these experiments. The controls were actually made in the experiment, say it's the investigation, but it's not the controls from this experiment that were used in the same in the publication. Anyway, many co-authors were involved, some of them very unfairly. Imagine you are the technician in the lab. You did a very nice gel. You are so proud it's been used for the paper, high-profile paper, and then the paper gets retracted. Your gel is the same. You did your job. You did a very nice job, and or you're a co-author from elsewhere. And thousands of papers, literally, were citing the retracted ones. What's the status of these papers? I mean, it's okay, of course, but what's the status? 2 researchers, including the one who gave the name to the file, were heavily punished. More researchers were not directly punished, but they are now out of business. And the reputation of major institutions was questioned. And there was really a scandal with, this is the number of press article in the general press, like 40 in 2015. And then there was a second wave in 2018 of press papers that were out. And really, it was looking there like there were aftershocks, like during an earthquake, and it was really like, was it a curse? Was it harassment? Probably both. There were more affairs, more investigations, more retractions from co-authors, from colleagues that were not co-authors, but including the highest scientific hierarchy, including the CEO of CNRS at the time, for her own research paper from her PhD. She was not a co-author with René. A diversity of institutional treatments for apparently similar cases, like these 3 persons, for instance. It was, I do not comment on that. I don't want to go into this. There were 3 investigations, and I accept the results of the investigations. I cannot do anything else. But it was commented that the investigation regarding these 3 persons for apparently similar facts did not produce the same outputs. And so if we want to learn from this affair, let's look at this paper from 2002, which was corrected. It was a paper, 2 classes of short interfering RNAs in RNA silencing in the EMBO journal, published in September 2002. It was flagged in PubPeer in January 15 because of this. So apparently little things regarding the background of the gels, northern blot gels, etc. Regarding the background, if you contrast the gels, then you see that there are some duplications. The type of thing that you do when you want to hide something. Not meaning that they were trying to hide something, we don't know, but the type of thing that you would do if you wanted to hide something. So the paper was corrected by retracting the figure. It was admitted by the editor that the figure was important, but the results were maintained even if the figure was not there anymore. They could not find the originals, etc. So it was the figure was retracted, and it was reproduced in a preprint in August 15 with a gel, the background of which is more like what we had in our labs. Let's say it's more gray. It's not as nice. Anyway, let's look at this paper now, a paper that's been retracted in a paper from 2003 that's been retracted because, again, of duplication. Then in this case, because of duplications, the same bands had been used in different contexts, and so it was corrected. The experiment was reproduced, and it was corrected and republished in the correction. And then some scientific sloth went to examine these new figures and the new figures of the paper, and discovered that this was too empty. It could not be that empty if you over-contrast the thing. So it was, again, probably a wrong figure, the correction. And so the paper was retracted for this and some other reasons. And what's very striking is that this paper is actually about a technology that's of overexpression that's very useful and very, very much used. And so it's very often cited, even if it's been retracted, which is not something that should happen. It's very often cited, despite retraction. And so what René decided to do is revisit the results so as to produce a reference that 20 years after, roughly 20 years after, revisits with new knowledge, new technologies, etc., exactly how this expression system, the characteristics of the expression systems, and so that this reference can now be very well used and that it's okay to use it. I think it's quite good. It takes a lot of job, a lot of work. It's not something, if you imagine submitting a grant application to reproduce a work that you had made 20 years ago and that you had to retract. It's not very sexy, I believe, for the reviewers. So it's probably something that you have to fund yourself, and you have to you have to do the job again yourself. So it's not something that you do for every of your papers if your papers get retracted. So I think it's quite an effort. It's nice that it can be given as an example. It's definitely not going to happen, I think, for every paper of the impressive record of Voynet and co-authors. And interestingly, in the second wave of citation in 2018 in the general press came when maybe the situation was we were kind of learning from the situation as we are doing now. In the research communities, there's clearly the Voynet scandal has been a stimulus at the national in 2016 and in institutional in 2018, took a bit longer. A stimulus to do something to prevent this type of catastrophe. For the general media, who were very severe in 2015, the same journalist who wrote this article in 2018 kind of learned from himself, and that's good. Stimulus to understand that situations are sometimes a bit more complex than they first look. And not to say that Voynet was right, it was not, definitely. But it was not like, what I don't like in calling the scandal the Voynet scandal is that you focus on the guy before you know if he did everything that is obvious, before you know if he was the only one, before you know if he did more, before you know, etc. And you focus on the guy. Maybe you let him collapse. That's what's happened sometimes to people under such pressure, especially if it gets into the media. They literally collapse. Happened to the CEO of CNRS at the time. She disappeared for 2 years, and the main actor, Voynet, at the end of their penalty, he was able to resume top-level research. If you look at the publication record now, he was able to restart publication, original research. If you look at the paper that he published, now it's in the legends of the figures. It's like every band is twice. Every experiment has been made 3 times. They say all of this. All the controls are there, etc. And he says when he submits a paper, he submits about 1 teraoctets of data together that the reviewers can check, because I can tell you in the beginning, he was under very extensive scrutiny. He was able to resume research. He was able to reassess and correct the scientific record, not 100%, probably not all of the scientific record, but still, he did that. And he even debated his fate in a journal of social science about what happened, how it happened, why, etc., which is interesting. So we've got the self-healing of science, but it's natural, it's healthy, it's unique to the scholar environment. The journals, they don't have that, the general media, but it's a heavy process, something that's difficult to fund, involving research that's difficult to fund. Guess, take just your last paper. Who is going to reproduce the results? Who is going to submit a grant to reproduce the results of your last paper and get the grant to do that? No one. You maybe, but no one. And it's still considered stigmatizing for individuals and for communities to correct or retract papers, whereas it's a healthy process. And the editors, I can tell you, they don't like it. I don't know if there are any editors in the room, but the editors don't like it. And corrected or retracted papers, they are not always properly labeled in the journals. So maybe sometimes on the online version, maybe half of the times, but never after download. And that's, I think, one of the big issues with Sci-Hub, which is never mentioned. There are other issues with Sci-Hub which may not be so bad as this one. There are many wrong or inappropriate papers which remain in the literature just because they are never corrected, they are never retracted, and everyone knows in the field knows that they are wrong. And the meaning of correction and retraction is not understood. And if you remember recently the Lancet Gate episode, the Lancet Gate, there was a paper in the Lancet about the use of chloroquine, I think, against COVID, saying that it was not useful, etc. And there was a problem in the data. And the paper was retracted within a week. So very fast for a healthy process. That was very good. And the comments in the press were, look at those scientists, they have to retract their own papers, etc. From journalists who are just unable to retract anything that they write. And it's never reflected anyway once the conclusions of the paper are in the public sphere. So like, for instance, the Sierra-Leone case, it was about the toxicity, so-called toxicity, claimed toxicity of GMOs to rats. And even still now, in the French Google, if you Google toxicité in French, it doesn't work in English, but if you Google toxicité OGM, GMO, and in Google image, the first thing you get is those images with the rats with terrible tumors that date back to 2012 and with no warning about the fact that the paper has been retracted whatsoever. So if you or your kid wants to make to speak at their school about GMO toxicity, they will find the Sierra Leone paper just as if it were valid. So yeah, we've got self-healing of science, but we know there are some issues, so we better be careful. What are we talking about? Some definitions. I usually take the comparison that there are three pillars for a responsible research, just like this chair here. If one of the pillar is rotten, you will fall on the floor. And it doesn't matter which one it is. So it's one of the pillars is ethics. It's slightly different from research integrity. Ethics is mostly about moral, the fitness between the scientific activity and some moral considerations. Some philosophers would not agree on that, but okay. It's the question raised by the continuous fit between progresses in science and technologies and societal evolutions. It's highly cultural. There are some things that are conserved, like human cloning, etc. But it's highly cultural. It must be discussed permanently in every country, in every culture. It applies to all scientists, whatever their status. And it's organized or discussed in mixed committees with philosophers, scientists, politicians, decision makers, etc. Scientific integrity for us is deontology, is the field of deontology. Deontology is the way of doing your job properly, whatever your job. If you're a scientist, the scientific job. If you're a baker, the bakery job. If you're a train driver, driving trains. And there are two things, and we separate them in France because by law, deontology in the French law is for public servants, is the control of public servants' independent action. So once it's in the law, it kind of preempts the other meanings. The control of the public servants' independent action of their own interests, like conflicts of interest, etc. So it applies to all public servants exactly in the same terms, like judges, teachers, nurses, scientists. with exactly the same terms, saying the public servants does their job with dignity, impartiality, integrity, and probity. And integrity is the integrity of Eliotness. It's just being uncorrupted. And so it applies to all public servants. It's ruled by lawyers because it's in law. And that's in France. And and the one that is more, the pillar that's more about the topic of this talk is the one in the center. It's deontology by soft law. It's not by law. There may be some legal framing, but it's not by law. It's research integrity, sensu stricto. It's the rule that governs the practice of research. And the practice of research has some rules. Many of them are not written, even if they are very strong. Like, for instance, the order of the authorship in a list of authors. It's very strict. You know that. You know that because when you receive a CV, you can tell from the CV of the person, you can tell whether they were the ones who did the job, who were the PIs, they only participated because they are first, last, etc. author. We don't do the same way in different disciplines. Like in math, they tend to use alphabetical order, and we have a very strict system in biology. And it's very strong. It's written in some journals, but secondarily, I would say. It's an unsaid, unwritten law that some have written, but it's an unwritten law, very strong. So a law can be unwritten and still be very strong and universal. Because if you write to a scientist in Australia, in France, in California, on planet Mars, etc., they will understand directly from the list because of this unwritten law. And there are others, similar laws. It's universal. It prevails as an unwritten professional code. And in France, there is now a legal frame since 2020. I work on that with a senator. And it applies, again, to all scientists, whatever their status, students, retired, etc., private, public. And it's ruled by researchers. And it's often merged or confused in the international arena. For instance, the Committee on Publication Ethics, first pillar, is actually working on promoting integrity in scholarly research and publication, second pillar. So there are some definitions. It's difficult to define positively research integrity, but there are a very good attempt is the one in the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity, which even if you're not European, you can go and read because it's an interesting reading, quite easy. It's not big. It's about 10 pages. And it defines, the first version dates back to 25, and it's been revised in 2017 and 2023, just last June. It attempts the positive definition of research integrity, and with around the 4 principles, which are reliability, honesty, respect, and accountability. And research integrity is more than the absence of a lack of integrity, absence of lack, blah, blah, blah. So fraud, pure fraud is defined as plagiarism, falsification, and fabrication of data. That's the pure fraud, classically in the literature. And the values, it's negative, of course, and the positive values of honesty, reliability, respect, and accountability are okay in the landscape. And there is a gray area of questionable research practices that go against these 4 principles, yet they are not FFP, falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism. It's like biasing references, misusing stats, biasing the sampling, using irreproducible methods. That's about 1/3 of the biomedical journals. Defective archiving, withholding results, undue signatures, beautification, salami slicing. And very salami slicing is doing 10 publications where you just need one. And very close to that, misconducts with regards to ethics, to conflicts of interest, to regulation, misbehaviors like harassment, etc. It's connected, but it's not within the scope of research integrity and or lack of research integrity. But often when there is some misconduct in one of these items, there is often a misconduct in others.
What's salami slicing?
Sorry?
What's salami slicing?
Salami slicing, yes. So the question for the record was, what's salami slicing? Salami slicing, I just told it very briefly, is when you can make one publication and you make 10. You you slice very thinly. Yeah, well. Well, then we'll see a bit later that you can automate a lot of things. You can even pay for that. Anyway, so how common is this? I'm not talking about your publication record because I know it's absent, but how common is this? Don't look at the curve going up and down because it's not meaningful for what I'm going to tell, but that's the retraction rates. It's much less than 1 per mil of the papers which are retracted. So what? Very few. That's the tip of the iceberg, or maybe even the tip of the tip. But it gives an idea of what we start with. The body of the iceberg is when you ask, when you think about the gray area, the questionable research practices. This Fanelli has examined different studies about that, and let's say among the scientists, when they make surveys, about 5% of the scientists recognize that it happened to them once, maybe, to have committed some questionable research practices. I'm not going to ask you, hold your hand. Okay, no, promise. But, okay, ask yourself the question. A bit more, 20%, know of colleagues who committed questionable research practices. Of course, the numerator is not the same. You know more colleagues than just yourself. But they know of colleagues. It's not just the straw and anyway. And a bit more even know of cases that should have been reported and they were not. So it's not so rare after all. We must make a difference between fraud, an attempt to deceive the reader, and sloppy science. Again, it's not exactly the same thing, but okay. And there is the environment of the iceberg as well. And Elizabeth Bick in this paper examined literally thousands of papers. I don't know how she does. I mean, she's impressive. She examined thousands of papers and looked at the figures, contrasted them, etc., and found duplicates, etc., and how often in 40 journals and in a subset. And that was in about 5% of the papers, 4 to 5% of the papers that were published in the years 2000. And it increased actually when Photoshop and other similar software came into the labs, and it decreased then. When after the Voynier affair, for instance, when it started to be known that no, we should not do that. So now it's a bit less probably. There is so that's the same as publish or perish. You must be productive as a scientist if you want to keep alive. Does it mean by all means? Are we seeing some kind of industrialization of misconducts and frauds? if you can guess if I'm asking the question is, I have some ideas that maybe yes. And indeed it's the case. So if you take this author, for instance, who is a very active scientist, I'm not quoting the name, his record in the Web of Science is of 182 or 83, I don't remember, papers, 82 I think, papers in the years 2012 and 2013, 2 years. So that's one paper every other day. I cannot even read that. I think it's unbelievable. I don't believe that. At least it means something in terms of what an authorship means for this guy and for others. And by the way, this type of thing, I've been in some juries sometimes, and recently I've seen sometimes that maybe, I mean, this is extreme, but high number of publications in like a promotion file, for instance, would eliminate you because the jury would consider it's not serious. Bing. I've seen that. So, and I was happy to see that. The small business about plagiarism is torturing text. And that's the work of Guillaume Cabanac, who is still going on. He found that in some papers where you should expect, for instance, the term big data, instead of that, you find colossal information. When you would expect cloud computing, you find Hayes figuring. When you would expect random value, you find irregular esteem. And this is meant to fraud with the plagiarism software, the anti-plagiarism softwares. Because of course you can copy a text that includes the term random value, for instance, blah blah blah, random value, blah blah blah, and instead of that you change random value with irregular esteem. It doesn't mean anything, but at least the anti-plagiarism check is fooled. And because it's a plant pathology conference, I checked in the list, and the plant disease in 280 papers he found has been replaced with plant ailments. So in total there are 3,080 as of yesterday, 3,887 instances of similar words that are used with nonsensical things. And you can have the complete list and the paper. I didn't mention in the start that if you unload my slides, technically I hope it works. The links are active. But post-plagiarism 2.0 is forging text. This paper was accepted after peer review. And it's actually been synthesized with a text that's been written with a software called SciGene. It takes about half a second or less, and you get a text. You can be a co-author with anyone. I'm a co-author with Pythagoras, and I don't remember who am I. Anyway, quite brilliant. And you can read that. I mean, it's grammatically correct. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. But the peer reviewers, they have seen nothing because they just didn't understand probably. And they were fooled just like, something I don't understand. Should I tell the editor that I'm not understanding something that is, submitted me? I'm not going to tell him I don't understand. And so I'm going to tell him it's a good paper. And it was accepted. It's been retracted since then. Forging text with SciGene. And of course, now there's ChatGPT. So in the literature now you find things like this. This is a paper about something about automobile mechanicals, and probably the authors were not so inspired about the future scope of the knuckles, the steering knuckles, and so they asked ChatGPT. ChatGPT, can you tell me please the future scope with the steering knuckles? And ChatGPT answered, as an AI language model, I cannot predict the future. However, here are a few potential scopes, etc. So you find this now. So that's the end of small business. The good point is probably the end of it's the end of plagiarism. And the bad point, well, there are several. I'm coming later to that. The small business in image manipulation is I showed this slide before. So contrasting, removing background, etc. That was the small business with software editing, image editing softwares. Probably paper mills represent the end of the small business. That's something that the editors of Feb's letters and Feb's journals found some years ago. When they received manuscripts submitted by different teams from different universities to these two journals, and somehow they came to discover that between manuscript 1 and manuscript 2, some of the bands could be manuscript 1 here, manuscript 2 here. This band and this band could be overlaid, exactly the same band. Not the rest of the gel, but just this band. And similarly, the backgrounds were the same. And and Elizabeth Big, still her, made a survey with another scientific sleuth, and they found at the time 400, and now the list is up to a bit more than 600. I actually found one. Papers who probably came through the same process as these ones, and that is the most simple explanation for that is to imagine that someplace there is a small company whose job is to produce figures and probably text and publish these figures and this text without any relationship to any type of experimental work or this type of dirty things that you spend a lot of time with. So this is called paper mills. Yes?
What area, what discipline are we talking about?
So the question was, I'm repeating the question. The question was what area, disciplinary area. It was not plant pathology, but most of these papers, one of the characteristics in this particular paper mill, which is with Elizabeth called the tadpole paper mill, because some of the bands were in the shape of tadpoles anyway. Were in the medical sciences, and one of the characteristics of the key characteristics were the structure of the title actually of the paper. That was this process of traditional Chinese medicine, this product of traditional Chinese medicine addresses this orphan disease. And it's important to have an orphan disease because you don't have experts to review the paper. Using this small RNA pathway, which, again, I mean, is so complicated and you don't have proper experts to review the paper.
Are we saying that small RNA researchers are innately...
No, no, I'm not saying that. No, there is some good research in small RNAs. And in long RNAs as well.
No, I think, if I understand, he's saying that the people who are cheating identify the combinations of subjects where you're not going to find any reviewers.
Yes, that's it. That's part of the idea. Not to be able for the editor, not being able to find a suitable reviewer, and so having the paper published easily. And there are several paper mills. I mean, this one, the first one that was discovered, and another one, and probably based in China because all the papers were Chinese. And again, I don't want to point on the Chinese science. Definitely not. Sometimes I replied to a journalist that I did not want to say Chinese science was bad because I don't think it's the case. And I'm thinking very much of the Chinese scientists who are honest, and it must be hard for them to struggle in this anyway. And so there is another paper mill who has been a little bit more characterized by a very courageous scientist in Russia, for instance. Anyway, it's not something that is like an open store. you know. But still, there are sometimes they have to sell, so they have to be open to the outside. And for instance, this paper is not in plant pathology again, but this paper about COVID-19 vaccines was published recently. It was published in June this year. And it has exactly the same characteristic as this announcement that was made in Telegram and in Twitter, where they were looking for the fourth author for a paper about this. And actually the Twitter account that posted this announcement also then posted the fact that it was finally published. And it was also in another advertisement for the second and the third author. So I don't know what Dr. Farshad Gareh-Bakni is a specialist of. And if you look at his record, I mean, it's not obvious, but at least he probably purchased for several $100 the position as the fourth author.
Why do you need to have a fourth author?
Because probably, again, so the question was, why do you need to have a fourth author? First, you need to have a fourth author if you want a fifth, and and
Why can't you just have one author?
no,
What is the advantage
because
of
the
that?
business model is actually to have several authors who pay each of them a few $100, so that if you are the company who sells the paper to the authors, you want to embark as many authors as possible because they will pay. Each of them is going to pay.
Different places must have different prices.
That's the case. Yeah, it's the case.
I guess I'm just
Yeah,
naive.
it's the
I
case.
don't-
It also depends. So different places have different prices, and it also depends on the impact factor of the journal, of course, etc. On the readiness of the paper when it is published, this one was submitted, but it was not revised yet, so probably it was not so expensive. It's more expensive when it's already accepted, etc. So apparently, yes, we are seeing some kind of an industrialization of the business, and it's not something that's like marginal. It doesn't mean, of course, the people who do good science don't do good science. They do, but it's not something that's marginal. There are beginning to be some evaluation assessments of what the rate is of these fake publications. And the first figures that are coming out, they are just stressful. It's like 34% in the field of neurosciences, 24% in the general field of medicine. So not in big journals, but still it's there. And if you suffer some condition with an orphan disease, for instance, it's quite likely that the only bibliographical references that your doctor is going to have is one of these papers. So apparently, yes, there is some kind of an industrialization with computer-generated contents, text, images, data, why not data, gene bank accessions, sequences in gene bank. I mean, it's been documented. Emergence of a business. They produce papers for you, for you to be an author. So authorship for sale, peer reviewing for sale. You may have received already some offers for peer reviewing services sent by someone who send their Publin record. Probably the bill is coming with the next email. Citations for sale, you know that, etc., etc. So it's not everyday's life, but still it represents 34% maybe of the papers in neurosciences. It's 1/3. The Chinese Academy of Sciences has taken action in 2020, in December 2020, and it worked. So if you look at this journal, for instance, the first one, the full with a tool that's called Paper Mill Alarm, and you can find the entire study here. If you look at this particular journal, so the red are the fake publications, and the green are the apparently correct publications. So quite a lot, fake publications. And when the Chinese Academy of Sciences published a warning list, early warning list of journals, it decreased immediately. But then this journal was not in the list, and while it was not very active but more or less clean before the 2020, it started to receive a lot of submissions, including a lot of fake publications. And then it was on the list in 2022, at the end of 2022, and it decreased immediately. So, yeah. So what can I do? We can improve the research system. I don't know what time it is. Okay, I must finish. Punishing bad apples, so scientists, a rotten apple that's going to rotten the entire net, cannot be sufficient. And because there is probably not any such thing as a bad apple, and this bad apple thing, or maybe in post-harvest plant pathology, but not in meta-research. And we've been working on that. We are working on that in the European project called Beyond Bad Apples, and the motto of which is, it's the orchard, not the apples. So we must look at the environment. And the strength of and it's also the weakness, by the way, of the scholarly environment, of the academic environment, is horizontality. Everything goes through the peers. And the strength is the peers. You are the peer for the others. And so if you start to change the system at your level, then it's going to change. And that's also the weakness, because if the others keep the system, it's going to be kept. So we have to change it. And the way forward is for everyone to adopt responsible references and standard operating procedures. We have to share the values of research integrity. The scientific method is actually the main asset of those having received scientific education, be they scientists in labs or German chancellor. It's the most striking thing that they can make the difference between unknowledge and knowledge. We must stop assimilating research integrity with scientific fraud. So when you work on research, when I work on research integrity, everyone tells me, "Oh, so you work on fraud?" No, I don't work on fraud. I work on research integrity. It's just the opposite, actually. We must disseminate guidelines and references, such as the European Code of Conduct, and that's the job of the Embassy of Good Science. We must train every student in scientific education to research integrity and to ethics, as well as the lab advisors, because the lab advisors are the first trainers. In France, we have written the doctoral oath. It's now by law that and again, it's something we worked with the senator, and that when they defend their PhDs, the students have to say the doctoral oath, which is this one, in the presence of my peers, with the completion of my doctorate in my research field, astrophysics. In my quest for knowledge, I've carried out demanding research, demonstrated intellectual rigor, ethical reflection, and respect for the principle of research integrity, which I learned during the training that was mandatory, etc., blah, blah. But it's not in the oath. As I pursue my professional career, whatever my chosen field, I pledge to the greatest of my ability to continue maintaining integrity in my relationship to knowledge, in my methods, and in my results. And if every graduate, every doctor does this, it's already going to be better, of course. We can make procedures, we have to make procedures more transparent. I'd like to ask you, how can a key process like peer review remain anonymous, person-dependent, opaque, and redundant, and and Einstein did not like it. There was just one, it was not fashionable at the time to have a peer review, and there was one paper of Einstein who went through peer review, and that's how he reacted. He reacted to the editor. We had sent you our manuscript for publication and had not authorized you to show it to specialists before it is printed. I see no reason to address the, in any case, erroneous comments of your anonymous expert. On the basis of this incident, I prefer to publish the paper elsewhere. And that's what he did. And he was wrong. The reviewer is still anonymous, but he was right. He did a 12-page review, which is in this citation here. You can go and fetch the paper. It's interesting. EMBO Journal, the EMBO Press, has a transparent process, which is good for that purpose. I mean, they published the editorial exchange with between the reviewers. If it is scientific work to review papers, then it should be quoted. Something
In real time or after?
After, when it's published.
No.
It's already good.
It needs to be in real time.
Yeah.
Well, you'll finish. And
Yeah.
There are journals that do it in real time.
Yeah, and I'm going to mention that. So, will opening science prevent misconducts? A good part of the gray area is going to be addressed, actually, but not all, but a good part, okay. We can improve the research ecosystem by introducing a diversity of services around preprints before they get published by publishers, and increase the readability of preprints for humans and for artificial intelligence. Increase the interconnection between data, protocols, communities, preprints, etc. The PCI experience I'm going to mention later, and the open journals like epijournals. So it's diamond open access. It's free for the reader and free for the writer, for the author. The peer community in system is this one. So you submit your preprint to a community. It works a bit like an editorial board of a journal. And then they read, they review the preprint, they exchange with you, and in the end, it gets, they like recommend the preprint, and a preprint with a recommendation for many graduate schools in France and maybe elsewhere is equivalent to a published paper for the student, for instance. It's a very good system, and I think we should have a peer community in plant pathology, actually. There is none, and it would be good if there were one. We making the procedure transparent also include thinking about open science. Will open science introduce new types of misconducts? I mean, open fraud would not be a great advance, I believe. And that's something we are looking in the European project ROSI, Responsible Open Science in Europe. And for instance, with data. How can I certify, as a reuser of data, how can I certify my student about the authenticity and the sincerity of open data which I find in repositories, that they have not been fabricated? And also then, but that's more related to ethics, is the FAIR standard. FAIR is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. That's the standard for open data, as you know. Is it sufficient? Is it a sufficient safeguard? And in terms of ethics, some suggest to add the CARE, that is collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. And so to conclude, science is the archetype of integrity with the scientific method, with the permanent control by peers, with the self-healing ability, but some situations in the past and maybe in the future challenge this evidence publicly, and challenge the ability of science actually, and the trust of the public for science to address the main challenges of our times, which are many and big. Research integrity is not the same thing as research ethics. It's related, but it's not the same thing. It's the conduct versus the purpose of research or science. Pure fraud is rare, but the gray area of very diverse misconduct, we don't know the size, and it's like vague at the edges. It needs some expertise to know if it's okay or not okay, and maybe it's going to change with time. And this gray area contains malevolent activities, but contains sloppy science as well. And it's not exactly the same thing, but it produces the same result in the end. There is emergence of a kind of industrialization about which we probably have to organize ourselves, but that's not easy. And the way forward is to share values and reflections, as we will perhaps do now if we still have time, but we don't, and to adapt standard operating procedures to the upcoming context, including open science, which is probably useful for to improve research integrity. And with this, I thank you. And again, for those who came later, you can upload the slides in a PDF format at this URL, or by scanning the QR code, and you can reuse them if you like. And if you manage to sell them, you just tell me how.
Comments? No?
Yes.
Very interesting. I sit on our ethics board for the faculty. There's a different, like, what is your opinion? There's a lot of policy, but it's difficult to implement this sometimes and to monitor it. So, yeah, what comments do you have on that?
So that's something. So what we do at Ofis is actually our duty is to help a policy to emerge and to help the policy to be implemented and monitor the policy. So that's right, our job. And it's hard, actually. It's hard, it has to be made, but the most important is probably to offer the student and every scientist a way to think about what they are doing and how they are doing that, so that at least when they are in front of their computer and almost on their way to doing something that in 15 years from now, when they are CEO of the CNRS, that's going to make them explode in flight. At least they don't. So we have to share values. I think that's the most important thing. The policies is the policy that we are implementing is about having a CEO, an officer in an RIO in every institution, in every university, etc. That can and these guys can work together. That's very valuable in France. Now it's mandatory to have this. And these guys work together and they implement policies in their situations, which are different from the next one, and they track frauds.
It's needed to close the session now.
Yeah, sorry.
People are coming.